and we're going to call this meeting to order. We have a quorum. Hopefully we have a couple more people sneak on in. We'll start with introductions. I will go first. My name is Matt Caldy. I'm the current chair of the Environmental Commission. Next, let's do Sam.
Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a senior at IU studying environmental and sustainability studies and GIS, and I have a permaculture degree certificate, and I just like to stay involved with the environment.
Excellent. Don.
Commissioner and active with MC Iris and the Parks people. So that's it.
All right. Mike.
Mike Litwin. I'm a commissioner also, retired from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Megan.
Megan Murphy, a brand new commissioner. I'm a lecturer at IU in biology. My academic interests are evolution, animal behavior, and entomology. And then for fun, just being outside mostly are my hobbies.
Very nice. Didania.
I'm Didania Whitney. I'm retired from Franklin College as an English teacher and a member of the Tree Commission.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Well, I guess also Linda.
Linda Thompson, Senior Environmental Planner with the Planning and Transportation Department in the city.
And finally, Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm getting my dual degree in public affairs and environmental science, and I'm also the Environmental Commission's fellow.
Okay. Well, welcome, everyone. Next, I believe I would accept a motion for approval of last month's minutes. Anybody got a chance to read those and wants to submit that motion? Didania?
I second that.
Awesome. All right, we'll do a voice vote here. So I'm going to vote yes. Sam?
Yay. Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Mike?
Yay.
Megan?
Yes.
Dania? All right. Let's see. Next, we will move on to public comment. I know we have a number of members of the comment here today. So I guess raise your hand and we'll start with whoever's ready. All right, Chris, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm Chris Neggers. I'm a citizen of Bloomington, a former environmental commissioner, and work for the Nature Conservancy in my professional life. I'm here today to request an update to information on the Environmental Commission's website regarding environmentally friendly lawn care. In particular, there is a homemade herbicide recommendation on that website that includes using vinegar, salt, and soap to control unwanted plants. And that is in particular, well, that is specifically the item that I'd like to have removed. Homebrew herbicides like that are not effective at controlling plants, but also more concerningly, very harmful to the environment. They kill all living things and alter the soil chemistry permanently and do much more damage than specifically engineered chemicals designed to control invasive plants. Furthermore, if a licensed pesticide applicator were to use such chemicals that were not approved by the EPA, it would be a violation of federal law. So that is my request, that information be removed from the website.
Seen that information, but I did not know any of that. We will certainly have to look into it.
I didn't realize that was still on there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
I
Yep,
think
you're
some of
welcome.
the worksheets are pretty old. We should maybe kind of review all of them at some point, but we'll definitely look into that as soon as we can here.
All right,
Ellen,
thank you.
may make a comment.
Hi, I'm Ellen J. Cart with, I'm president of the Monroe County Identify and Reduce Invasive Species group. And I'm here just to back up what Chris just said. This has been an issue that came to my attention, boy, I think a few years ago. And I saw this brochure on the Environmental Commission's website when I was looking for some other information, because there's fantastic information there on fear-resistant plantings and all kinds of different things. And I saw that and I was kind of horrified. So I had sent an email to just the Environmental Commission, I think the contact link off that website a few years ago, and never heard back. And so when Chris mentioned it, I said, yes, I know, I've seen that. And it's a real concern, because this is something that we kind of preach to people, that if you're going to kill a plant, use a legal herbicide, one that has been tested for its impacts, and we know how safely. And, you know, for most of us botanist types, the idea of dumping salt on the ground in order to control invasives is a pretty horrifying notion, because of what it does not just to plants, but to worms and nematodes and springtails and all of the diverse soil fauna that, you know, needs to be protected. So I just wanted to speak up and say that while there's other good information in that brochure, that recommendation is really problematic and and puts you at a little bit of risk promoting that. As Chris noted, if you are a licensed applicator like I am, it would be illegal to do that.
Thank you. both.
There's been a lot of bad PR for glyphosate lately. What's your opinion of that? And if you think it's still the proper thing to use, do you have some scientific information that we could use to promote it or to discount that?
Boy, that's a good question, Mike. And Chris, I'm going to want you to weigh in on this too. You're another licensed applicator, but for many years, I supervised people who treated non-native plants, invasive plants with herbicides. And so, you know, I kept up to date, because the last thing we want to do is use a chemical that would harm our employees. You know, bottom line, we want our employees to be safe when they're doing this. And I did a lot of research on glyphosate, and it is the best studied herbicide in the world. And the thousands of studies that have been done have not found a direct link between glyphosate use, as outlined on the label, and negative health consequences for the applicators. And so from a standpoint of safety for the applicator, and then safety for the environment, because it's a relatively short-lived herbicide that is not mobile, it's bound up by organic matter, so it doesn't move. It's about the safest thing that we can use. And I completely emphasize, according to labeled directions. And if you don't follow the labeled directions, you know, you can't guarantee anything. But glyphosate is something that is used by a lot of people and used effectively and safely. But following labeled directions is crucial.
Sam?
I want to chime in here also, because I am also a licensed applicator, and I do have to agree that homemade weed killers, for the most part, are pretty bad for the environment. But I do also want to say that if it provides any solace with commercial herbicides, you know, in the context that we're talking about in this discussion right now is for invasive plant control and for the benefit of the environment. And it's just good knowing that, like, it's not being sprayed on our food in that context. So I think that's where a lot of the scares from herbicide come from is when it's has to do with food and we're ingesting it through that route. So I would also agree that if you apply it by the label and you are wearing the proper PPE, the risk is very low, especially with the ready-to-use formulas on the market.
Awesome, Don.
Last year, there was a EU study, which again, basically coincided to what was just said about the safety of glyphosate. I mean, it seems more of a US I don't want to use the word fringe, but not necessarily mainstream view. So I concur with what Ellen and the other speaker had said. And also in the EU, there's quite a bit of controversy, and it's hard to see. My reaction is generally to fall back on the published literature, which seems to be more consistent. But definitely, I was surprised to learn that the salt and vinegar thing was still on our website. And I don't feel that's a good idea to have that floating around.
We'll get it off right away.
Yep. We'll act on that as soon as we can. Thank you everyone for bringing that up. Is there anything else on that subject before we move on? Both commenters happy? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time.
I noticed that a couple more people have come in, so if that's all right, we'll get a couple more introductions real quick. Dave.
Yeah, my system is down. I'm trying to get in from my Mac, but here I am from my iPad, and I'm David Parkhurst, a member of this commission.
Thank you. And Carrie?
Hey there, I'm Carrie Albright, one of the newest commissioners for the EC. And as Linda mentioned in her email, I was on the commission several years ago and for a few years, and have just now been able to join back in. So super excited to be part of these conversations again. And I can see on the agenda there are a lot of initiatives that are up and running, and yeah, just really excited to be part of it again. So thanks for having me.
Welcome back. I believe the next thing on the agenda would be your speaker, Maggie Sullivan, telling us about the results of the Monroe Lake study and next steps.
Great, thank you for having me. I'm going to run through a real quick 15-minute talk about what we have learned in developing the Lake Monroe Watershed Management Plan. I tend to just keep talking, so if you have a burning question, speak really loudly and I'll pause, or I can answer questions at the end. And I want to take a moment to thank Dave Parkhurst for inviting me and for serving on the steering committee for this project. I'm sure you're all familiar with Lake Monroe, which technically is not a lake, it's a reservoir. It was constructed in 1964. And we've been looking at ways to protect the lake by looking at its watershed. A watershed is the area of land that drains to a particular water body. And we care about that because anything that happens on the ground in the watershed can get washed into that body of water. So this project was specifically looking at non-point source pollution. So that's things like fertilizer or animal manure, or septic system leakage, or any kind of trash or oil, anything that's left on the ground that can get washed into Lake Monroe. This is a map of the Lake Monroe watershed. It's about 440 square miles, and about half of it is in Brown County, about 20% in Monroe, 20% in Jackson. You'll notice that Bloomington is by and large outside the watershed. Most of Bloomington drains south into Salt Creek below Lake Monroe, and then the north side drains north up into Bean Blossom Creek, which comes out of Lake Lemon. And a watershed management plan is simply a clear plan of action for addressing water quality goals. It lays out the problems and proposes solutions. This has been a 2.5-year planning process. It was led by the Friends of Lake Monroe, who got a grant and matching funds, and assembled a steering committee with representatives from about 20 different organizations to guide that process. We did a lot of community engagement. We directly reached about 400 people through our community forums we held at the very beginning to gather people's concerns. We did a lot of public presentations just like this one. We did programs in a couple area schools, and then we recruited volunteers to help us collect water samples. We had about 100 people volunteer for that. We also did some education that's a little harder to measure. We installed signs marking the boundaries of the Lake Monroe watershed. We're actually putting another one up next week. We had really good media coverage in newspaper and radio. We hosted 2 watershed tours. We got a couple TV spots and developed 2 public service announcements. A lot of the project was reviewing existing data. This is a map of land cover in the Lake Monroe watershed, and you can see a lot of forest. Our watershed's about 84% forested, but we also have a fair amount of agriculture located mostly along the main stream, since that's where the ground is flat. Very little urban land, as you might imagine. We went around and observed stream crossings to identify if there were any issues and sort of catalog the state of the streams. One of the things we looked at was stream bank erosion, and there's quite a bit throughout the watershed. Part of that is just because this area has very highly erodible soils, and part of it has to do with how the streams are stewarded. We also looked at riparian buffer. That's a fancy way of talking about the vegetation on either side of a stream. And we want to see permanent vegetation, ideally trees, but something that can catch the runoff and filter it before it enters the stream, and that has roots that can stabilize the stream bank. So we don't want to see this picture on the left where the cropland goes all the way to the edge of the stream. The upper right here is kind of a traditional filter that a farmer might put in to provide a little bit of buffer. And then down at the bottom is that kind of thick vegetation and trees that we'd most like to see. We did a lot of water quality sampling. We sampled 5 tributaries monthly for a year. So North Fork, Middle Fork, and South Fork Salt Creek are the main tributaries coming into the lake. We also sampled Crooked Creek because it had been flagged as impaired for E. coli. And we measured the water coming out of the lake so we could see what's going in and what's coming out. We also sampled within the lake for 6 months at 3 different locations. And we did our water sampling blitz where we had 125 sites. We sent volunteers out to collect water samples. We did that once in the fall of 2020 and once in the spring of 2021. Sort of a snapshot view. So what do we learn from all this? We identified 11 problems that we discussed in the watershed management plan, but there's really 3 that we focused in on: sediment, nutrients, and E. coli. Sediment is a concern for 2 reasons. One is that it fills in the lake, and the other is that it carries nutrients and other pollutants with it. Lots of potential sources of sediment: stream bank erosion, lakeshore erosion, heavy livestock usage, tilling for crops, clearing for development, and clearing for timber harvest. When we looked at the sediment in the lake water itself didn't have particularly high levels of total suspended solids, but the lake acts as a sediment sink. About 92% of the sediment coming in gets stored. We're estimating that's around 36,000 tons per year. This isn't a huge surprise. This is what reservoirs do. Streams move sediment and reservoirs capture it. When we look at where that sediment is coming from, it looks like North Fork is the dominant of the 3 main tributaries, which was a little bit of a surprise. We figured South Fork might be a bigger contributor because it has more agriculture in the watershed. So that was an interesting thing that we saw. And then we also looked a lot at nutrients, partly because of their connection to harmful algal blooms, which are an increasing issue in the lake. And again, they have many potential sources. So septic system leakage is one, animal manure, just being carried in on sediment, and then fertilizer use, whether that's on a farm, at home, or on a commercial property. Lake Monroe nutrient levels, it's mildly eutrophic, which means it has higher levels than we'd like to see. It's a little more productive, a little more likely to have those algal blooms. And about half the phosphorus that comes into the lake gets stored, about 15% of the nitrogen. One of the interesting things that we saw, if you're into water chemistry, when we sampled in the lake, we sampled from the epilimnium, the higher portion of the lake, and then the hypolimnium, the deeper part towards the bottom. And where we saw the highest phosphorus levels were all in the hypolimnium, in the deep part of the lake during the summer months. And what that is actually phosphorus being released from the sediments. When oxygen levels drop down to zero, which they do in the summer, that can release phosphorus from the sediment back into the water. And those are what we call legacy nutrients. We unfortunately didn't have the budget in this project to quantify those, but it's something to keep in mind because even if we stop all the phosphorus from coming into the lake, there will still be phosphorus that's released from the sediments during those summer months. When we look at the sources of nutrients from the tributaries, we see the highest concentration in the highest load from the North Fork for phosphorus and the highest nitrogen load from the South Fork. And again, we'd kind of expected both of those to be South Fork just because it has a higher percentage of agriculture. E. coli is a concern because it's an indicator of fecal contamination, which contains a number of pathogens and can lead to beach closures. And our big question here, is it coming from Bessie or Bambi or Bobby? And this is unfortunately a hard question to answer, and we don't have the exact answer, but we do have a little more information. First of all, E. coli levels in Lake Monroe during our study were extremely low, well below the state standard. But we also reviewed historic data, and there are historic exceedances in 2015 and 2016. So we know it can happen in the lake. And then we did see that the tributaries had a fair amount of E. coli, South Fork being the largest contributor compared to North Fork and Middle Fork. And when we look at instances of E. coli exceedances above that state target, there wasn't a high percentage from our sampling blitz, but they were pretty well distributed. And then we also had additional data from the Brown County Regional Sewer District, which was sampling throughout Brown County, and they measured quite a few exceedances. So our big takeaway is this is kind of a widespread issue. We looked to see if there was a correlation with where we saw livestock that had access to streams. Didn't really see a strong correlation there, but it is definitely an issue out there in certain streams. We sent samples for fecal contamination source analysis, and this is a relatively new technology that looks at coliphage, which are viruses that infect coliform bacteria like E. coli. And some of those species can be connected to a human source versus an animal source. We only had about 5 samples that came back with results, and 4 of those were really close to a 50-50 split between human and animal. We had one that was much higher probability of human source, but the big takeaway from this really is that we saw both human and animal sources are likely and are things that we want to address. This is a map showing livestock observations in the North Fork section of the watershed, but overall for the watershed, about 20% of the stream crossings that we looked at had livestock on adjacent property, and about 7% had livestock with free access to streams. So anywhere you see a red dot, that's where there's cows or horses or some other animal that has easy access to streams. And that's one of the things we'd like to address in our watershed action plan. Septic systems, we were able to get a rough count, about 9,000 septic systems in the watershed. And again, this is focused up in the North Fork area. You notice Sweetwater Lake and Cordray Lake have many houses. It's really hard to know how many are failing, where there are issues. Different studies have estimated failure rates from 1% to 25%. But we do know that about half the systems are more than 30 years old. And the lifespan of a septic system is estimated at 25 years. So it's very likely that there are failing systems out there and that it will continue to be a growing issue as these systems continue to age. Some of the other things that we discussed in the watershed management plan are trash, invasive plants, flooding, biological integrity, which basically means we're not seeing good diversity of wildlife in the streams. And then a couple of sort of administrative issues, just a lack of public awareness and a lack of coordination between the different counties and agencies that span the watershed. And then people had specific concerns about, is boating a big contributor and is forest management a big contributor? that we weren't really able to find the data to quantify those, but they're things that we can certainly educate around. We took all of our data and crunched it to see if there are particular areas that jumped out as having the most issues. And we identified 5 of the 16 sub-watersheds where we want to focus a little more attention. So 3 in the North Fork area and 2 in the South Fork area. But overall, our big focus is going to be on looking at sources. So we're looking at areas with active agriculture that have resource concerns. We can see there's an issue. Forestry sites where there's active erosion, eroding stream banks, streams that don't have enough riparian buffer, eroding lakeshore, and areas with failing septic systems. So those are all things that we want to target. This is a very messy map that sort of combines everything that we know. So we've got our 5 watersheds of concern. We've got little dots showing where we've documented stream bank erosion or lack of buffer or livestock in the streams. We know we want to look at lakeshore as a possible source, and then these are the agricultural areas highlighted. And this is really just a starting point. As we move into implementing our plan, we'll be really working to pinpoint where the projects are most needed. And that's what our action plan is all about. So a lot of it is promoting best management practices. So for livestock farms, that's fencing animals out of streams. That's putting in heavy use area protection in areas where there's a high density of animals. For cropland, that's doing no-till or low-till farming to minimize soil exposure. That's doing cover crops to protect the soil in the winter. And that's putting in these buffers between cropland and streams. For forestry, there's a whole set of management practices that are mostly around preventing or controlling erosion by careful road design, carefully designed stream crossings and minimizing them, that sort of thing. And then, as I mentioned, restoring and enhancing those riparian buffers so they can act both as a filter for anything flowing into the creek and also for stabilizing the creek banks with their roots. We'd like to look at restoring and protecting floodplain. This photo on the left is actually a farm field that's owned by the Indiana Department of Natural Resources as part of the Lake Monroe property. They have acreage that they rent out to tenant farmers, and they've identified about 12 acres that they are willing to reforest to take out of production. And we're really excited about that project. This is a photo of Deer Run Park in Nashville as an example of a land use close to a stream that can handle a little bit of flooding, and they also can come in and enhance the vegetation to make it a little more naturalized. We want to promote septic system maintenance. A lot of people don't know they should be pumping their septic system every 3 years, and maybe don't know that you need to be more careful about what you put down the drain if you're on a septic. We're looking at lakeshore erosion. This photo on the left is the Amy Weingartner Brannigan Peninsula owned by Sycamore Land Trust, which has some pretty severe erosion. The photo on the right is the Deem Wilderness Peninsula. It's part of the Hoosier National Forest. And the Hoosier National Forest actually just got a grant to study erosion control in this area. So they're looking at possibilities. There's not an easy solution for this, particularly because the reservoir is designed to have a fluctuating water level, and that just exacerbates erosion. But we're looking into ways that we might be able to minimize that erosion. Same thing with stream banks. There may be places where it's worth coming in, pulling back that stream bank to be a more gentle slope, stabilizing and planting. Again, we haven't identified specific projects yet, but that's something that we want to look at. A big part of what we proposed in our action plan is education. So making sure that everyone, whether they're a homeowner or a farmer or a forester, knows what they can be doing to protect water quality. We also want to activate our community members to get involved, and I feel like we did really well with that the last couple of years, and we want to keep the momentum going, whether that's fun events getting out on the water, or whether that's helping collect water samples or pick up trash, just keeping people involved and engaged. And then partnership with that is encouraging collaboration between groups. We know this is going to be a multi-county project. We also have a lot of land that's managed by the state or by the federal government, so making sure we can get everyone on board for these projects. So what's happening next? We have finished the watershed planning process, and now we're launching what we call the Lake Monroe Community Action Plan. And we got a grant from the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County and some additional funding from Monroe County Stormwater Board. And we're basically getting out and educating people about the plan. So you guys are one of my first guinea pigs to hear this presentation that I hope to give far and wide. We want to increase awareness. We are preparing an executive summary, a short version of the report that we can circulate to government officials and community members, anyone who's interested. More local presentations like this. And then we're going to host 2 public forums, one in Bloomington, one in Nashville, which is how we kicked off the planning process. So now we want to come back to the community, let them know what we found, get some feedback. And then we're also looking at doing a separate watershed summit just for local officials. But really our goal is to educate and engage. We'll be asking people to take water quality pledges, whether that's pledging to pump their septic tank or pick up their dog waste or get out and volunteer. We'll be hosting some more events like a watershed tour. I'm working on some material about forestry best management practices in partnership with Monroe County Stormwater and Monroe County Planning to increase awareness on what we should be doing here in Monroe County, and then hopefully sharing that with other counties. And then we'll be educating about septic system maintenance. We actually got some grant money to do a cost share program where we can give people vouchers that will offset the cost of septic system pumping or installing a riser on their septic tank to make it more accessible. And I'm getting ready to send out a targeted mailing to all the households in the Lake Monroe portion of Monroe County that are on septic systems and encouraging them to take advantage of this program that we're also partnering with the health department on. And then the last thing that we're working on is laying the groundwork for additional future implementation. We're looking to identify potential partners and start to build a database of landowners who might be interested in putting some of these projects in place on their property. We are hoping to get a second large grant this fall through the 319 non-point source pollution program. That would be about a $300,000 project that would go for 2.5 years. And a lot of that would be a cost share program for best management practices on agricultural land, forest land, and along stream corridors. We'll be doing a lot of education with that as well, workshops, educational mailers, and then more fun events like boat tours. So this is a long-term project. Our action plan has a 20-year scope. We know it's going to take a lot of collaboration, a lot of partnership, and a lot of finding funding. So we're excited to move forward, and I always like to end my presentations by reminding people how they can take action at home. If you have a septic tank, make sure you're pumping it every 3 years. If you use fertilizer, please be thoughtful and sparing, particularly with phosphorus. If you're lucky enough to live along a stream or a lake, leave a buffer of plants along the edge. If you have a pet, be sure you're disposing of that waste, and please leave no trace when you're out enjoying Lake Monroe. That's all I have today. So thank you very much for listening.
Excellent.
All right, we've got a couple of hands. Sam?
Hey, Maggie, that was a great presentation. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You may have heard about this already, and this is from an email that David sent out to us in the commission about the Department of Defense new Sentinel landscape program. I see that the Lake Monroe area falls within that boundary. I'm just curious if
Sam, that actually came from her. Her name was at the bottom.
Oh,
so
well, even better from the source. So I guess my question more directly is, how is Friends of Lake Monroe thinking about being involved or not in that?
Yeah, it's a really exciting program that really just came to the surface yesterday. So I haven't had a lot of time to find out the details, but I'm hoping to meet with Christian Freitag, who's the head of the Indiana Conservation Law Center, and he's very interested in collaborating with us to see if we can do these programs in parallel and complement each other. I think it's a great opportunity to get more conservation on the ground, which is exactly what we want to see.
Does anyone else have any questions? Everybody seems pretty content. I think that's a sign of a great presentation. So well done and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie.
Seeing no further comments, I think we're going to move on to reports. First up would be Tree Commission.
Okay, well, I sent you the minutes from the tree commission yesterday, and so I'll just basically look through those, but we changed our meeting time. First time in 30 years that it's been changed. In the Urban Foresters report, which was attached to those minutes, Aaron Hatch, who was once a member of this group and is now the city forester, has been getting feedback from the public on a bicentennial tree planting projects that's going to be in 6 different parts of the city. And she put out bids. The Davie Resource Group will implement that project. As for trees at IU, we get a report on that every meeting. IU has received approval for its Tree Campus USA status, and they updated their tree care document as part of that process. They're going to inventory trees on all 7 campuses, and those will help to keep the forests and trees on campus in good shape. And we talked a bit about the proposed merger of Environmental Commission and Sustainability Commission, but didn't really have a lot to say about that. And one of a guy who has been a member for 30 years, Tom Coleman, is dropping out. So I think there are now 1 or 2 openings on the tree commission if anybody wants to apply for that. And that's it.
Thanks, Dave. Next, we have a report from Monroe County Environmental Commission. Sam, were you able to attend that?
So I logged into their Zoom link and I was not able for whatever reason to spectate their meeting. I'm not able to see their meetings after their minutes after the meetings either. So I'm wondering if they've gone defunct or if they're just not meeting right now, but they did have an agenda up, and the only notable thing from that I can see is that they discussed Indiana State Bill 411, which is about renewable energy. So that's all I have from there. I'm trying to reach out to them to see if they have any other information about their meeting dates.
Well, thank you for your effort. Let's see, next, I believe would be BCOS, or Bloomington Commission on Sustainability. Don? You are muted, Don. Don, can you hear me? It seems that you're on mute.
Unmute. Come on. Okay, try.
Don, we heard you for a second, but then you muted yourself again.
Technology.
I'm using my wife's old iPad. Now it lost the video. Anyhow, I'm not care about the video. Again, they met on the 8th. A lot of the meeting time was spent on internal issues related to amendments, which they ended up not being able to act on because they didn't have a quorum, or they were a little bit unclear as to whether, because of the number of people that are vacant from the commission, so there was a lot of problems, internal issues related to discussion of that. But the meat of the meeting was their upcoming thing about equity and environmental, the present meeting that they're going to have as far as environmental justice, as far as being able to meet the these climate goals with, and they're going to have the consultant for the city of Oakland, California, discuss what might be shareable from this consulting company's work with the Oakland, California community. And I believe that's March 16th, if I'm reading my notes correctly. I sent the link for Matt Flaherty's or the discussion about the consolidation of commissions. The city council decided to keep their sustainability climate action work subcommittee functioning, and it survived. So there's a meeting coming up with that, and I sent the link for that today to commissioners. There was, at the end of the meeting, there was a discussion about the potential merger between the EC and BCOS. One of the things was clear was that there's a very different outlook, more towards social issues affecting sustainability than with their group. There did seem to be some that saw the role of them being both overlapping and also the specialization. So there was seemed to be an unclear, even among the members of their commission, as to who does what, which is one of the things that basically is sort of outlined in the consultant's report to the mayor's office. So this is not sort of surprising. I mean, to me, and one of their commissioners, is that we share more in common with each other. So it's big point what Matt Flaherty meant was that he would appreciate both commission's members observing or participating or sitting in on the Zoom meeting that they're going to have coming up. And that's why I sent the link to you all. That's sort of it. Any questions? Well,
I don't see any questions. So the next report would be Environmental Resource Advisory Council, or ERAC.
Okay. Well, unlike the Tree Commission, where Damia is very good at getting the minutes out the same day as the meeting, with ERAC, we meet every 2 months, and we usually don't get the minutes for the last meeting until 2 months later. So I'll have to give you the rough minutes that I took down. And my lighting isn't very good right now, but let's see. At Lower Cascades, they're widening the stream channel, and they're putting in a boardwalk and a viewing platform for the falls. In the process of widening the stream channel, they're taking 23 trees out and they'll put 100 plus more going in. There will be an extension of the Clear Creek Trail, a quarter-mile north of the Woolery Mill. The Griffey Loop trail project updates are in progress. There's a pair of bald eagles that have been there all winter. And they're going to try to get rid of the Eurasian water milfoil that's there. We always talk about various educational things, and I don't always keep up with all the things that get mentioned, but on April 22nd in RCA Park, there's going to be some sort of major meeting. Maybe we'll be involved with that, I'm not sure. There'll be a stream cleanup April 30th on Jackson Creek in the Jackson Creek Park. And they talked about the climate action plan. The Parks Department will have a climate action team related to the city's plan. So that's what I have to say about ERAC.
Thank you. Next one, which I don't know if we have anyone participating at this time, the MPO Citizens Advisory Council. It looks like maybe next Wednesday at 6:30 would be their next meeting. I'm sure there was one between our last meeting and this, but I don't think we have anyone attending those. Does anyone know off the top of their head if they'd be available to attend those moving forward so they can report to us? If not, that's okay. We can look into it and we can figure it out by email, but I thought I'd float that out there now that we do not currently have anyone attending those to my knowledge. See, the next one that we do have people attending would be Friends of Lake Monroe.
Which I don't need to say a word because you just got all the news from Maggie.
Good call. Follow that up with MC Iris, Monroe County Identify and Reduce Invasive Species.
I'm muted. Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hello?
We can hear you, Don.
Hello? Okay. I sent out the minutes from the last meeting, so pretty much summation there. One observation from that I would make for MC Iris for and us is also the fact that early activities coming up with BCOS's participation in it. Hope we will follow up on somehow getting involved ourselves again with this year. We're moving. We've run into bad weather last 2 weeks with some of our work, but last week we did get a day in at Latimer Woods, so we got a better idea about the extent of the invasive plants in Latimer Woods, and hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to do some more work there. And Saturday at Lower Cascades. So that's pretty much what, again, one other point would be the fact that the BCOS, MC Iris, and our group are all pretty well looking at some of the same sorts of ideas of being able to support actions to support the less financially well-off neighborhoods with, say, tree planting and replacement of trees. If homeowners remove invasive plants and doing work with, say, our wildlife corridor project. So all three of us seem to be looking at ways of trying to get resources available so this just doesn't become the affluent neighborhoods versus the less affluent neighborhoods.
I have a question for you, Don. While you're talking about tree plantings in neighborhoods, I didn't hear if you mentioned this group, but are any of those groups that you're working with the Canopy Project in Bloomington, the new nonprofit that is doing tree plantings around town?
I'm not sure when what Ellen would probably, if she's still with us, could probably answer that better than me as far as MC Iris. I know that BCOS has talked about the Canopy people. I guess I should have included them as well.
Sorry, MC Iris is working with Canopy
That's great to hear.
also.
That's what I thought.
Thank you for our report. The last one listed on reports is Ecpc, Environmental Commission Planning Committee. Linda?
Here I am being muted. Again, I'll just kind of list the cases that will be on the Plan Commission agenda for March. We have two for consent agenda. One is Strausser Construction, and they will be building a self-service storage facility, 3000 South Walnut Street. That's an empty lot just north of Bluestone Tree Company. Another one that will be consent agenda, it's called Grant Properties. It's at 613th East 12th Street. That's basically the corner of Fess and 12th Street. It has an alley on the east side and the railroad tracks to the north of it. And they are going to take down a single family structure there and build a 4-story building with parking on the bottom and 3 floors of residential units above that. And then as far as the petitions that will be heard, Trinitas Ventures, they're simply asking for an amendment to their district ordinance. And the Trades District Technology Center, they've got, they will be presenting a plan, a major site plan to allow a non-residential building in the Trades District. And everything else on the agenda are updates to the UDO. And none of these updates have anything really substantial. They're mostly just clarifications and typos that are being corrected. So that's it for the March Plan Commission meeting.
Linda?
Thank you.
Beyond reports, we have discussions from active working groups, beginning with biodiversity, the update on the connectivity plan and the neighborhood meeting. Ben, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, that sounds good. So about 2 weeks ago, I gave a presentation on the habitat connectivity plan to some neighborhood associations. I think we had a pretty good turnout. I think over 20 people came, which was pretty cool. And I gave a brief presentation on that. If anyone wants the presentation that I didn't send it to, please, you can just email me. And I also sent Don because he wasn't able to attend the meeting. So I can also send you a brief minutes of kind of what happened in the meeting. We got some responses from some community members. One person was asking if the EC would help, but then I followed up with her and she didn't really respond. But that was only yesterday, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. And then also, Linda and I were invited to One Neighborhood Association to talk in March as well. So that is a potential way to connect with more people. On a bad note is I haven't been able to get out the materials like the map and the pledge and the brochure yet. I've been a little bit busy with Eco Heroes at the moment. That's just been taking priority. But I hope in the next week or so I'll be able to get that out as soon as possible to the neighborhood associations and let them take a look at that. And hopefully that will motivate some people to purchase, or not purchase, but get ask for more free trees from us because we're offering that this year. So that's go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, I was just asking, do you think generally it was pretty well received by the guests?
Yeah, I mean, I think Linda said it best. She said it was inspiring. So I think that's good. Yeah. And then I think I'm up again with Eco Heroes. So I just got started. I just got started with Eco Heroes this past week too. We got a letter made. We got the business letter made as well, along with teachers. I just crafted a poster. I sent it to Linda. My hopes are not high because I'm not an artist. So I tried to create 2 little patches and have little animals walking around. But that can be worked on tomorrow.
We'll have to talk about the alligators.
Well, I put out a bunch of different. Well, I didn't want to draw the animals myself, so I just found the pre-made images because I definitely can't draw any of the native species here correctly. So I thought that was an easy coping way to not have to draw anything. Anyways, so we're hopefully going to get all that material out. I think something that we need to talk about during this meeting is who's going to be on this committee. I know we have 2 people, but it would be better if we had more, just for decision-making information. And we don't even necessarily need to meet at all right now. We can just communicate through email. So it's really not that time-consuming, and it would be really helpful to the people that are already on the committee so that they don't have to take on so much work. I don't know if you want to contact me after this meeting or if we want to talk about that now. Another thing we need to discuss is the theme for this year. Linda and Matt, I think, had mentioned fighting fragmentation as a way, as a good theme to connect it with the Habitat Connectivity Plan this year. So yeah, what do people have to say about that?
Ben, who's on the working group right now? You said there were Matt and Carrie.
Cool. I think we're all set now.
Yeah,
I think that does the trick.
Oh, did someone else raise their hand? I wasn't looking.
No, sorry. In the chat, a whole bunch of people just volunteered. So.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about just basically what the timelines are and what the demands of such a working group is, because it isn't until quite a bit later in the year that we actually put out the prompt and everything, right? What would the rough timeline of events be?
Yeah, so this week and next week, it's really just the feelers we're getting out right now. We're sending out emails and letters to some businesses and some teachers and other prominent leadership within the community to hopefully contact their students or other people other artists in the community so that they can start getting prepared for the day in April, which is the 23rd of April, I believe. And I think we have reserved Cascades Park under the Lion's Den shelter, if I recall correctly. It's not Tiger's Den, it's Lions. Yeah, I think, okay, yeah. I just wanted to clarify that. And that will be on April 23rd. And right now we're really not needing to do too much work. We just need to be sure that fighting fragmentation is a good theme. And if anyone had another good idea for a theme, that I can email everyone here late tomorrow, and we can just confirm on the theme or suggest new ideas as well.
Yeah, the main demands will be farther out and closer to the event, where there'll be some judging and there'll maybe be some setup and tear down with any in-person component. But in the meantime, it's just an interest in participating in the theme and the description, and possibly
we can maybe use some help in fundraising.
Yeah, I know last year I went around to, or Don and I actually, Don did most of the work actually. He went to a bunch of different Bloomington businesses and handed out a poster for advertisement. And then also, I think he also went for, Don, did you go for funding as well, or was it just for advertising?
I didn't do funding.
Okay, so that's fair. I think I have a pretty good list of Bloomington business. Oh. Anyways, I think I have a pretty good list of Bloomington businesses because we just put on the last Eco Heroes in September. So I don't think I did most of the reconnaissance then of the changing businesses, because a lot of businesses went out of business last fall because of COVID. So I think it's pretty accurate, and it shouldn't be too difficult other than printing out labels for letters. So yeah.
Good news now is it looks like we have a lot of volunteers for when you do need any legwork in that working group. So that is excellent. Thank you, everyone. Actually, I do have a question. Sorry to backtrack a little bit on the connectivity plan one. Is there a timeline for that as well, for the release of the map or anything, or is that kind of as things get completed?
Yeah, I would have liked to get this out like last week, but it's just the time constraints right now. So as soon as I finish the Eco Hero stuff, either this week or the beginning of next week, I'll move back to the habitat connectivity plan, and I'll hopefully get all that information out. I know I think the brochure is like super close to getting ready to be sent out, and I think the pledge is also. Linda was the last person to have edited the pledge, so I haven't taken a look at it yet, but I think she's pretty happy with it, so that's good news.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. I had intended to attend the presentation that you did, but I had a scheduling conflict, so it's good to hear about it. Anyone else have any comments on either the connectivity plan or Eco Heroes before we were to move on to old business? Seeing none, our old business agenda item today is the discussion regarding the Plan Commission memos and the EC Plan Committee or Ecpc. Since Linda's role has changed, we will not get the same input as we have had in the past, and we don't have to decide today necessarily, but I thought it'd be a good time for a discussion to figure out what ways we may be able to kind of fill the void, ways to keep an eye on the projects and see what memos we may need to make. Linda, do you have any suggestions or?
Well, I'm not sure about suggestions because I don't know how much time and effort the EC wants to put into it. Because it seems almost like it would have to be an individual. Let me just kind of run through the steps. When a developer wants to build something, they come to the department and they talk with a current planner. And that's when it's kind of a back of the napkin idea that usually. And they'll talk about the scheduling and the permit fees and what they, the idea that they have in their mind, what will work and what won't work. And then they, the next step is to present that to a group of people at the city called Development, DRC, Development Review Committee. And those are people from all the various departments. And the current planner will present the plan to them, and they'll give, everybody will, go around the room and give ideas on what could be better or get their questions answered and such. And then the next step is that they need to actually submit the plan to the department. And when they do that, they also usually have to have a neighborhood meeting. But when they submit the plan, then that's kind of official, and they'll come up with one of the plan commissions that it can be heard at, if it needs to be heard at a plan commission meeting. And then basically, I have previously been in on most of those meetings. So right after the final deadline for submissions, the Ecpc and I met until COVID, of course. And, I would give them an overview of, I would describe the plan to them, and, we would discuss it, and they would give me their ideas on, either getting a question answered or a recommendation that we could give to the developer. Maybe they would take care of it before plan commission meeting, and maybe it would wind up as a recommendation in the memo. And then in a couple of weeks there's final revisions. So there's an opportunity for the developer to make the changes that that all the different city departments have suggested, including the EC via me. And then there's the final plan, and when that's reviewed, that's when I would write the memo with the recommendations that the Ecpc had for the plan commission on things that they thought should be added or subtracted or changed in the plan to make it a better environmental plan. And so basically that's what somebody has to follow, those processes to come up with the information to write a memo. And also, having a clear understanding of the UDO and, a handful of the other titles in the municipal code is necessary. So it's going to be kind of tricky. Now, that being said, in my new role, I will be evaluating, I've already started this, the recommendations that the EC oftentimes gives the Plan Commission. And we're going to see if we can make a change to the UDO so the EC doesn't have to continually ask for something. And there's actually a number of things that the EC asks for on a number of recommendations that they provide kind of regularly that actually could have something to do with the way the Planning and Transportation Department does their process. So some of the more frequent recommendations could be dealt with by a code change, and some of them by just policy change on how we go about our business. So that's all I have to say right now. I'm sure there's questions.
a lot of different steps along the way that you would need people to fill in. Before calling on Sam, I was going to ask, do you think we would need somebody as early as the development review committee meeting? Do you think we need someone to attend those? I think you said that was once a month. Or
Yeah, those are once a month, and they're beneficial because you hear about a project from the get-go. The problem is it's not always immediately submitted to the plan department, as an official project. But you do, get to know the plan from the beginning. Another thing, another place that you could, someone could go, that I actually never attended these, but the department has a lunchtime meeting for the Plan Commission to go over the proposals also, and that's another meeting that someone could attend to get the lowdown on the cases.
Sam first here.
Thanks for the update, Linda. I wanted to ask you if you could repeat again what you were saying about the UDO or the code or something and the Environmental Commission. You're saying something about that may potentially change in the future.
What I meant by that was that the recommendations that the EC gives over and over and over, it begs the question, why do we have to keep asking this same question over and over again? And as it turns out, some things could be changed in the UDO so it's in code. What the EC is requesting is actually in code.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike?
It seems like at some point we need to communicate with the planning director on this, but if you could get those sort of things incorporated into the UDO, I think we probably could if we could get a summary from planning staff of things related to environmental issues. Seems like for some of these urban projects, we could just use the same boilerplate language for all of them, and we could just add something if we see a gap in the summary that we're receiving. And then for projects that have site-specific issues, then we would have to get into some kind of a more detailed process.
Mm-hmm. Well, the director is happy to meet with anyone and talk. I've already talked to him about that.
Matt, didn't you have, I could be wrong, but didn't you have concerns about that?
Not that specifically. I don't know. I like the idea of the direction of it where our comments would be kind of built in to the point that we don't have to say them anymore, but I'm worried about, I don't have the right words for it, not a lack of oversight since we aren't actually that directly involved in the process. But even if the remarks we usually give, the recommendations we usually give became a part of the process for them, I'd still be worried about some. I'd still want a way for us to keep an eye on it. So I'm not sure at exactly how many of those steps along the line that we would need to be involved. I mean, I know personally to me, the development review committee meetings sound fascinating, but there's also like no way I could attend them. So I don't know at how many steps we need to be involved, and if that is something we can do collectively by having someone who's available for one thing, someone available to ask a certain question, and then us to be able to decide that month as maybe a working group or something, whether we need to, make recommendations on a project or not, just so that we're still involved in the process in some capacity. But that's just kind of my feeling on it. I didn't anticipate us arriving at a finalized plan or anything in this meeting. I just wanted to discuss it further since it's been something that we've known is going to change, and we have to decide how much we're going to change with it. You know, but Ben, go ahead.
I have a question for you, Linda. Do you still think like development projects will still try and sneak things by, even though it's in the UDO?
Well, I don't know if they sneak it by or if it's accidental, but that's what the development planners are supposed to catch. And I was just on that team to catch the environmental things, and now they're going to be tasked with catching the environmental things if they occur.
Well, I'm not sure exactly how we can proceed with that one at this time. Linda, I'll be sure to be in conversation with you about the, there was a lot of steps you mentioned. I didn't memorize them all. So we'll figure out kind of what we need, what we think we need to do, and see if we can get any volunteers for a couple of those steps. But it'll be an ongoing thing for a couple months here, I'm sure.
Right. I'll try to jot them down, and that would make it easier than me trying to describe it.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this subject before new business? Yes, Sam?
I'll just, Matt, I'll just agree with what you're saying. I think it's important to kind of keep the conversation going together like that.
I'll be happy to stay involved.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Seeing that we have little new to add to this one at this time, though, I think we will move on to new business. And the first item of new business is elections. I can't recall how we did this last time around. Mike, do you want to report on?
Sure. We've got a great slate of candidates here. Sam is a candidate for the chair position. Matt is vice chair. We didn't really get any volunteers for the secretary treasurer position, so I offered to take that. And so that's what we need to vote on, unless there's new candidates pop up here.
Would anyone like to volunteer for any of those spots to oppose those candidates? Mike, can you refresh me on what the process would be on voting for it? I can't, for whatever reason, can't remember at all how we did this last year. I only remember the in-person versions of it that we've done in the past.
Well, it would just be the standard procedure. Somebody makes the motion, seconded, discussion if there is any, and then a vote.
For each officer or for the whole slate?
For the whole slate. Right, Linda?
Yes, that's how we've done it in the past, unless there was somebody who was competing.
Which doesn't happen very often.
One roll call vote for everybody together.
Yeah, so first I would have to accept a motion, I believe, to
so moved.
Yeah, and the second from Virginia and Megan, the number of seconds and thirds. Okay. So we will go through roll on that slate. Start with Carrie.
Vote yes.
Okay. Sam.
I vote yay.
I will also vote yes. Next, Don.
Yay.
Mike.
Yes.
Megan.
Yes.
Dave.
Yes to all.
And Dana.
Yes.
There we have it, unanimously approved. Right. Congrats, everyone, and thank you for your participation.
Congratulations, everyone.
But we'll be excited to hand off this duty to Sam next month. It's in his hands.
Don't put me through too much trouble.
It's not too bad. It's a good, forgiving group. I made plenty of mistakes. The only other item in new business today was the letter of support for the erosion turf netting, but Linda was very busy and I believe didn't get that done quite in time. So I think we're going to push that back to next month's meeting.
Yes, sorry, I apologize. I got it started, but I got drawn off on some other tasks.
These things certainly happen. So at this point, we will come down to commissioner announcements. Does anyone have any announcements tonight? Sam?
I have two quick announcements. The first one is that I've been accepted into the Adopt a Green Space program for Bryan Park here in Bloomington. So over the next year or so, I'll be working with the Parks and Rec department to just do various things around the park. I hope to focus on combating the invasive plant species that are primarily around the Riparian Buffer along the stream and revegetating with some natives there. And then also on a separate thing, I just wanted to just make a personal comment about the potential merger that was talked about in the Novak group. And I just wanted to put my personal statement on record that I think that it would be good to get as much information about that as possible, as soon as possible for us. And in the meantime, I think it's important for our commission to remain independent. And yeah.
Well, just so you know, I haven't heard anything at all. I haven't heard a peep since they made their presentation to the city council. So if the administration is moving forward with it already or not, I am not privy to that.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to monitor the situation as it develops. Right now, there isn't much to report on, but keep an eye on it, and we acknowledge that you're in full support of our autonomy at this time here. Dave?
Well, it turns out my iPad has low battery, so I won't take the time now. I'll tell you later what I had in mind for this one.
All right. So you're welcome to try before the batteries die.
Well, okay. I can get started anyway. I worked for 3 years for the New York City water supply, paying a lot of attention to E. coli there. And as a result of that, I got invited twice to meetings of the EPA in Cincinnati, where they were working with E. coli and other things at bathing beaches that caused bathing beaches to be closed down. And at one of those meetings, we produced a book, and I worked with two other people there, two epidemiologists, and wrote a book chapter that shows the importance of knowing where these E. coli are coming from. Because, and I'm glad that Maggie has done some work with that. It's expensive and not easy to do. But the thing is, this book chapter showed that it looked at two different studies that had been done that showed that there was very little correlation between E. coli numbers and the things that actually make humans sick. And it seems to me that E. coli that are coming from septic tanks would be much more likely to indicate fecal matter that contains other things that make people sick compared to fecal matter coming from animals and birds and so on. So I'm glad she's able to do some of that work, and it seems to me it would be important to do a lot of it to try to identify where the bacteria are coming from and to close down or to really fix septic systems when those are problematic. Anyway,
I'm
I'll
very
quit for now.
hopeful that the new Southern Indiana Sentinel landscape designation will allow some environmental funds to help them out in that way. That would be awesome. Don?
At the BCOS meeting, Matt Flaherty suggested to the BCOS commissioners that they stay in contact, express their views to to him and the other city, the council member that represents your district. If you have thoughts that he thought it would be important for commission members, at least for the BCOS members, to be, and oh yes, he also included us in that we contact our representatives on the council.
That sounds like a good idea. And it's one of those things that while it's way too early for us to consider any commission action or statement or anything like that, everyone independently is always welcome to reach out to their representatives and let them know their opinion. Is anyone else with announcements tonight? Okay, I think I have a couple. They're small though. We didn't get onto the agenda yet this month. The bucket list results, I know that was summed up some in the minutes, but some of our main issues were, finding ways to keep the planning committee going, to look into the city developments, which we did talk about today. Another top vote getter was enforcing bans on invasive species in shops. And another one of the top three there was we're going to look into an air quality working group. Not looking for volunteers or anything yet. We still got to figure out what we're doing there. I did reach out to some people at the DNR about the invasive bans in shops, and that was what announcement I wanted to make. They said what they could use from us and all citizens for that matter is mostly education and reporting. They want everyone to know about the terrestrial invasive species ban, how to identify them, why to get rid of them, why natives are so important. They think that the biggest change is if customers of all these shops demand natives, they'll get natives. And they said they're starting to see that already, but they'd love that to continue. So I know we talked earlier in this meeting about looking at some of the information that we have on our site. Maybe down the road we can look into more brochures or any informational pieces about encouraging natives. They basically educating people and then reporting any invasives that are on that list that we see being sold or distributed anywhere is the help they want. They have enforcement down as they have it. It's just it's really difficult. It's repeat offenders sometimes. There's poor training for the nursery employees at box stores sometimes. But there's a couple other things he proposed that we could maybe look into in the future, but primarily they just want more and more educational resources. So that's my announcement on that. Last call for announcements from any commissioners. And with that, at 7:32, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you everyone for being here.